What's up everyone, Dayman here, and we're going to be doing another modern video. This one, it's going to be kind of a meta snapshot because we had a pretty large modern tournament recently, specifically one that was at DreamHack Dallas. So because we are able to start getting a look at some of the deck lists people are playing in modern, we can kind of get a little bit of a better idea of what the meta looks like compared to just seeing stuff online, because online might be a little bit skewed because of the cost of certain tickets for cards compared to paper cards, and things shift and fluctuate and everything like that within it. Also, it does need to be said that one tournament does not make a meta, but this at least gives us a little bit of a pulse check on how the meta is overall. So we're going to kind of go through, there was like at least 200 or so deck lists, but we're going to be going through and just kind of highlighting a couple specific ones that I thought, oh, this is interesting, let's look through this. We'll do some discussions and stuff like that. So why don't we jump into our discussion about the modern meta. All right, so you can see it's just a list right now that we've got going on here of kind of the top decks that were piloted over the weekend, and there's that metagame summary that is directly above me here, and you can kind of say, oh, okay, these are the most popular decks, more or less. Like, we could scroll down and be able to see the most played cards and stuff like that. That might help give us a better snapshot. Now, these are the decks that played very well, they performed well. Some things to note that I think are really interesting for this list in particular is 8th place and 13th place. These two initial outliers that pop up, which we'll get into. But you can see kind of like, we'll see some Euron lists, you'll see some Yawgmoth lists, you'll see some Murktide lists, you'll see some kind of Rhino type style of list, like the elementals, 4-color combo, the 4-color blank Euron, like all those I feel like are pretty much very similar lists together, so we don't have to really worry too much. But you can see just the power of 4-color good stuff, right? I'm gonna play the best 4-color cards in existence, and you know what, there's so many that I'm going to play Euron so I can play even more, and I'm still going to beat people because it's just such a powerhouse, resource efficient deck. And that's why it is up there, and why it helped win the whole tournament was because it's so efficient with how it spends its resources, where other decks are going to stutter and fall and run out of resources. The consistency, though, which is nice, is the deck number 2 of people bringing back that old school Jund style. So I guess that could be listed in there with Jund for number 2, Dimir Mill for 8th, and Merfolk for 13th. The rest of the stuff is what you would expect to see going to a modern tournament. All right, you're going to be seeing some Hammer Time stuff, you're going to see some Yawgmoth stuff, you're going to see some Murktide stuff, you're going to see some Elemental / Euron style of decks. That's normal. But what's fun and great about modern is that there are those outlier decks that can still do well, specifically for those players that practice with them. If you are going to go to a tournament and you have the option of playing the best deck that you've never played before, or playing a deck that you have more practice and experience with, I always recommend players take the deck that they have more practice and experience with, just because you know the lines, you know how to navigate it easier than if you're playing a deck that is just good. You might make more mistakes, have issues with sideboarding, things like that, where the deck that you're understanding, you're going to be able to make less mistakes and be able to pilot that better. And I think that's a big component of why this Dimir Mill, why this Merfolk player were able to kind of lock themselves in within that top 20 spot, right? 13th, 8th place in particular is they knew their decks, they knew what they were doing, and it helped. And plus, we see an elemental list, right? We're going to see Murktide list, there's 2 decks that care a lot about islands, so having unblockable creatures that are just constantly putting pressure on an opponent can be scary. And the Euron's list has a lot of efficient removal, but eventually you're going to get run over or have to start trading inefficiently there and 2-for-1ing or doing different things like that. So that's pretty interesting. Let's look real quick, because again, this is just sort of snapshot stuff. We'll just quickly look at first place. We'll quickly look over kind of our top list, right? These are the top ones that you should expect to see if you're running into stuff. So 4-color elemental blink. All right, it's that kind of, we're taking the best cards within that 4-color, like we've talked about, right? Solitude, Fury, Omnath, of course, Eternal Witness, Endurance, Icy Fine Caudal. It's cool to see this finding a home again, because it was so powerful in modern for a kind of a period right afterward of Modern Horizons 1 getting printed. We got to see a lot of people trying to play with it and find value out of it, and it kind of fell off, and now we're starting to see it back. Renin 6 is a big part, Teferi is a big part, right? We can go into our spells like the blink effect of Ephemerate. You've got more removal just kind of built in. That's the power of this deck, is it's just kind of, hey, I have removal spells, I've got removal creatures, I've got kind of value engines built into here, ways to like draw cards. So it's a powerful list, and you're gonna see it all the time. All right, it's 100% not going anywhere. Azura's Hammer, right? Hammer Time we've highlighted previously, but again, it's basically what Affinity turned into. Affinity kind of fell apart with the banning of Mox Opal, and kind of the speed at which it played wasn't as effective in our current iteration of Modern, where this is better because of just the ability to get this kind of big hammer online and just beat people to death. So the main reason to shift it into this blue-white is the addition of Reality Chip. That's kind of pushed people over the edge into that way of thinking. But yeah, the whole idea, if you're going to be going to a Modern event, expect to run into at least 1 or 2 Hammer Time players. It's very powerful. Same thing with our Golgari Yawgmoth. This, when we're thinking about core-based decks, they have evolved and changed over time in Modern, right? At some point I'm going to go through the history of it, starting with Birthing Pod and working our way up, because it's really cool to be able to see how chord-based decks have evolved over time. Now this is that very efficient machine with Yawgmoth, right? I'm using all of these, draft chaff, if we would talk about it, of these creatures that you wouldn't think would be very powerful in Modern, like Young Wolf, but it's this undying mechanic that makes them so powerful in combination with having things that will remove those counters, right? And that's where Yawgmoth comes in. And in addition to having things like Blood Artist, you can just drain people out. So I really like the deck. I think it's awesome. But I like chord-based decks. So Grist has been added into there, and we're seeing 4 of is kind of the way to go. Some variation of it, right? I know people were immediately starting to test it as 1 of, 2 ofs, and as things progress, they go, well, this card's just good. I'm going to just run more of them. So Izzet Murktide we've also talked about. It's just the best blue-red cards. It's very fast, out the gate. Dragon Rage Channeler's in there, Ragmon's in there, right? I've got a lot of good early 1-drops in here. The blue spells that we're running, right? A newest edition, Ledger Shredder, is really powerful because you're playing so many spells. You're doing this kind of efficiency grind that you can fill up your graveyard, make this scarier, draw cards, discard cards, put +1 counters on it. It's really good. Murktide Reagent, that's that kind of big, hey, payoff, we're going towards it. And then our spells are just like efficient, fast spells, right? We're going to see counter spells in here and removal spells. And that's kind of the name of the game. Team of Rhinos we've also talked about. This is the way of taking advantage of our cascade mechanics. All right, so we're saying Shardless Agent, legal and modern. Let's see what kind of fun stuff we can do with it, and it's all about making rhinos. All right, 2/4/4 rhinos. It's a good deck. It can kind of get out early against some people, but it doesn't have that staying power that something like the Elemental deck has. It's got a lot of that same powerhouse behind it of saying we've got these cool new tools to be able to use, right? Fury, subtlety, that sort of stuff. But at the same time, your tools can only get you so far. So it's strong. It's going to be consistent and be in the meta as something that you might have to fight, but it's not going to be as obvious as some of the other lists, but is worth mentioning in that regard. So let's talk real quick about some of the other lists. Like, we can scroll down because I do want to just kind of show you just like a lot of those same decks over and over again are going to be showing up. Tron, boom, showing up in here. Living End is the other one that's rising up within the meta as a big kind of pusher. I just kind of, again, hey, I'm going to be doing something and you're not going to really be able to mess with me. But as we see kind of more players start running Endurance, main board or sideboards, it might kind of help to keep the Living End decks at bay. We'll see. Burn sneaking in there as well. You can see some Boros Burn, and Burn decks in general are just one of those that are always going to be around in a meta. Anytime you go to a shop or anything, you're going to see at least one Burn deck there. But let's talk about the fun decks real quick. Right, Junn's starting to crop back up. You can see there's a couple here, so it's pretty similar to what you'd expect to see, just efficient removal spells backed up by disruption from Thoughtseize, Inquisition, that sort of thing. And you have efficient creatures that kind of get bigger and better. It's shifted into that, hey, let's run Ragavan because Ragavan's the best, right? And you'll see kind of different variations of how people are running it. But the shell for Jund is still going to be consistent. Tarmogoyf, Renin 6, Inquisitions, Thoughtseize, that sort of stuff. Riveteer's Charm is a cool addition that we're starting to see players play around with. I'm very interested to see where it's going to go from there. But the Dimir Mill and the Merfolk are what I'm most excited for. So let's talk about the Dimir Mill because I love this deck and I still play it. So creature-wise, it's just the same creature essentially. 8 copies of the same creature. Slight variation in the amount of cards that are milled, but still. Hedron Crab in here, mills top 3. Ruin Crab, mills 3. All right, and it's just slight variations in the sense of, okay, this is a 02, this is an 03. All right, so very, very cool. Same idea. We're just going to be milling, and the idea behind it is you're going to be running a lot of lands that will help you do that. Right, that means our fetch lands, Vistas. We've got the different little bounce lands in here as well, so it's what you'd expect. Field of Ruin is another good one because you can start destroying your opponent's things and you can get your own lands. You see, we do run a few more than most people with basics because of that. Ensnaring Bridge, big part of it, but the spell list that we see is pretty much similar to what the old school version is, with few exceptions. Old school speed mill style of play would run those like 2 mana spells that would mill like 10 cards. Now we're at this point in time that's not enough, because we have 3 mana spells that are doing better work than that, right? Fractured Sanity, I pay 3 and you're going to be milling 14 cards now. So 1 extra mana for 4 more cards. You might say, oh, is that really worth it? If worst case scenario, I can cycle it and still make you mill 4. So I'm able to replace itself. And that double duty is a big reason why people are running that. Tasha's Hideous Laughter, an all-star. Each opponent exiles cards from the top of their libraries until they've exiled cards with a total mana value of 20 or more. So very, very good. Archive Trap works really well with our crab plan of being able to blast their lands with Field of Ruin, and then when they're searching, whether they're playing their fetch lands or not, they're milling 13. It's kind of backed up with kind of Protection Spell, Fatal Push, and Drown in the Lock, removal / counter spell in that regard. Surgical Extraction is the clutch thing if you're going to be playing mill, is to be able to mill something and then strip away all other copies of it, because you can pay no mana for it and pick something in their graveyard and get rid of it. Now you can choose specific lands, not basics, but you can choose fetch lands, you can choose shock lands, so you can disrupt mana bases with this. I usually target annoying cards that are going to bother me, you know, threats or things like that to target, but you know, you can adjust it as need be. All right, so Merfolk's next. Let's go. Merfolk here. So most creatures we've seen, everybody's running lots of removal and interactions, where this one's saying I'm going to be running a lot of creatures. We've got our Force Negation in here though, so protection. It's this list because it's mono blue is still running Aether Vial. We've got a couple Spreading Seas just in case, but it's, look at this, it's all about cheap, efficient creatures and us getting out there early and getting there fast and putting in work. Merfolk Trickster, it's amazing being able to tap down people's creatures, drawing cards. Glasspool Mimic is just another lord that is added in here. Now here's a big push for running this, right? Stuff like this that messes with our opponent's plan of being able to do this. So other merfolks you control have Ward 1. So being able to say, hey, if you are going to be targeting me with stuff, you have to pay extra mana, and it makes our opponent's removal spells worse, because as long as we have something like this out, them forcing to be able to cast a spell to target one thing is basically forcing them to only do one spell to target one thing, where they might be able to say, oh, I can, you know, pay 1 mana for this, 2 mana for that, and kill 2 things in a turn, and now I have to pick and choose what to target. So very, very cool to see. Subtlety's also in here as a nice little, hey, let's sit here and draw some cards, right? Refill. And sometimes the aggro based decks like that run out of fuel, and that kind of helps them refill their hand. So very cool to see. Now as the Infect player, I did have to do a quick search, and it's all the way down at 98th place, but we get to see a lot of those cool other decks that are kind of near the end of this list, right? Like we're seeing some Rakdos Reanimators on here, we've got some Tron on here, mono green Tron, right? So I, you know, very happy to see at least in the top 100 Infect, but it just can't keep up in the current meta, but it is rocking out that Sultai, so much heavier on the creature side of things here. But yeah, did want to make a note of that, because you know it's important to kind of keep an eye on those fun decks like that. So let me know what decks you guys like. There's some Amulet Titan in here, Scape Shift, stuff like that. If this is something that you guys like, of us going through and just kind of doing quick meta pulse checks on what's going on with the meta, let me know. We might actually add this to our stream schedule of stuff, since we are back to streaming. You guys haven't seen, we are back doing our Magic content on Mondays, twitch.tv/TheRealNanman. You guys can be able to check out all that cool, crazy, and fun stuff that we've got going on over there. So you guys will be able to see this month we're going to be cracking some packs and trying to start making a cube. So on the 27th of June, you guys can be able to catch that out. So if you guys aren't yet, please consider subscribing, following, all that good stuff. But thanks so much for tuning in and watching, guys, and I'll see you guys next game.